you're not going to enjoy your language learning journey 100% of the time. I normally like to encourage people in their language learning journey, give them hope, make them feel like, yes, you can do this. And I still stand by that. I do think that anybody can learn another language. However, Kevin Abroad recently made a video and made some great points in that video, so I am going to link that in this video, in the description box. I recommend checking it out. It's a disclaimer to what I'm going to talk about now, and I do think that the problem is that we do pressure ourselves to feel like we're having fun, and then you're kind of in that, remember that SpongeBob episode where SpongeBob and Patrick are with Mr. Krabs and they're saying, are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs? Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs? Sometimes we do that in our language learning journeys and we go, are you feeling it now? Are you feeling it now? And you pressure yourself to have fun, and then it doesn't become fun because of the pressure. It's just added stress. Now, I wanted to say that as a quick disclaimer because I do think that the situations that you put yourself in or the experiences that are tied to your language learning can affect how you feel about language learning or your attitude towards it. Now, if you see me looking down, it's because I have some notes here because there are multiple things that I want to say about this. That these experiences, the memories that you tie to your language learning, do affect your future when it comes to your journey. Why do so many people quit a language learning class? They feel like it's hard, they didn't have a good teacher or a good tutor, they felt like they couldn't do it. It's their experiences that they had, and a lot of the time, they didn't give somebody else another chance. They did their 2 years and they were done, or they tried one method and then they were done. They didn't keep on trying. I want to talk about this in the context of both school and work, since I was in school about a year ago, and then also I'm working now, so I think that I could talk a little bit about these two areas, and of course I want you guys to share your experiences with me. Now, when a language rut happens, 99% of the time, you don't just wake up one day and say, I don't want to study this language anymore. It may feel that way, but normally it's a process. It's something where over time, these bad experiences may add up, may cause your attitude toward the language to change, and then you find yourself waking up one day and saying, I can't do this anymore, or I don't want to do this anymore. In the case of school, it could be that you had a teacher that you didn't like. My last year of high school, actually my last 2 years of high school, well no, let's back up even further to sophomore year of high school. I was in Spanish 3 and I had a teacher that I really liked. I really enjoyed all of our projects, I really enjoyed the class, not just because I enjoyed the subject, but because I enjoyed how she was teaching it as well and the different projects we were doing. I felt like I was learning a lot and progressing and really enjoyed it. The next year, I had that very same teacher, and she was absent for the majority of the year. After that year, I thought, okay, maybe she just had a bad year. You know, health issues happen, things arise in our lives. Well, my senior year, it was the same thing for my AP Spanish class, and I was really upset. Now, a lot of people did quit after their required years of class. Some people stuck through it because they wanted the credits, the AP credits, towards their college education. But even though you have a bad teacher, you know, that's just one experience. Another thing is going for a program in college. So we talked about high school, but university, college, whatever you call it. I call it different things, school, college, whatever. Maybe you're thinking about majoring in a language, and you've taken some classes, and you're still not sure. Majoring in a language isn't for everybody, and I was a language major, but I do want to say that it might not be what you think. It may not be whatever your expectations were for this kind of major. You may come out of it not knowing what to do, and then of course there's always the whole thing of, do I combine it with a different subject? Do I major in just languages? And that's a question that you can only answer for yourself. But one thing I'll say is it isn't for everybody, and you may have that professor that you don't like and you get through the semester and that's it. But then if you don't like the whole program, that can pose another problem. So then maybe you realize you want to minor in that language, or maybe you realize that language classes sitting in a physical classroom aren't for you. In the case of work, I recently tweeted the other day. It was about applying for bilingual jobs, and I worded it more eloquently in the tweet, but basically what I was trying to get at on the simplest level possible is that just because a job title says bilingual, multilingual, the name of your language that you're speaking or learning, anything like that, just because it has those buzzwords in it that might get you excited, that does not necessarily mean that you're going to enjoy that job. And we had some great conversations on Twitter through that. Some people shared about their experiences, other people shared other opinions as well. One of them being that multilingual people usually make more money. And while that is true, because I've seen that in different places as well, while that is true, you also have to watch out for a few things. Because for one thing, well, is money more important to you, or is job satisfaction more important to you? If you are taking a job because it's bilingual, but you know that you wouldn't do it in your native language, for instance, customer service, if you do not enjoy talking on the phone to other people and trying to help them out, or, dealing with sometimes customers who are unhappy, escalated calls, then even though you're practicing your language and then that can make it maybe a little bit better, if you're still not going to enjoy it, it is so not worth hating your life every day, going into a job that you're just dreading it. And disclaimer once again, work is not going to be fun all the time, but I know people who do enjoy their jobs, and they still complain about them, but they do enjoy their jobs. So it is possible to enjoy your job even though you may complain about it. Just once in a while, you might not always have fun. But I do want to raise that point because if it's a job you would not like, then it might not be the job for you. Now, one thing that Kevin raised was the idea that maybe the language does make the job a little bit more exciting, and I think it does depend on the job and the person who has this job, because maybe it's a job that you'd be on the fence about, not something you would completely hate, not a terrible job, but something that, I should give this a fair shot. And then the language component does make you like it more. There is that possibility, but there's also the possibility that it's just terrible as well. It really depends on the individual and the job itself. So those were a few points that I wanted to raise about work, but there were other things I wanted to raise as well, such as the idea of, well, sometimes in the workplace you do get taken advantage of for speaking a language that you did not get hired for. So maybe you got hired to speak English and Spanish, but then they're having you translate because they know that you speak a third language. And then they have you translate or interpret into that third language, but they're not paying you any extra. They just expect you to do it. And I know people who this has happened to. It happens to my mom. She's a teacher, but she gets called in to interpret all the time. No one pays her extra for that. They just have her do it because she's the resident bilingual person. So there is that possibility that people might use you for things, and it's one thing if they do it once, but if they're doing it consistently, just be mindful of that because that can happen as well. They'll take advantage of the fact that you know another language. And they mean well, and they're using you as a resource, but you are worth your abilities as well. All the studying and the time that you put into it, that is worth something. So I wanted to mention that as well. And then ultimately, I think to determine whether taking classes is right for you or whether this job is right for you, because as I was saying before, the experiences you have tie into your attitude towards language learning. So if you can't stand that teacher, that professor, especially that program, because at least with a professor, you can move on to a different one after a certain period of time, after a semester, after a year, or something like that. There are times where you're going to be stuck for a long period of time involved in that program, whether it's a language learning program or in your job. You will be there indefinitely. So it is important that you know what you're getting yourself into, or that you're very self-aware. In other words, you know what you want, what you don't want, if you're willing to give things a fair shot or not, and how you're going to handle that, because when you're in a longer situation like that, that could be the beginnings of a language rut. Because if you're in a program that you can't stand, and then by the end of that program you find yourself burnt out, or you have a sour taste in your mouth when you're thinking of that language, or if someone tries to speak to you in that language and you just get this knot in your stomach, that might have something to do with it. Not that you just woke up one day saying, I don't want to study this anymore, I don't want to speak it anymore, but you just don't have the desire to because of these bad memories tied to it. And then same thing with a job. If you're not enjoying that job, and as I said, you're not going to enjoy it 100% of the time, but if you hate that job, if it is the bane of your existence, and you're going into that job every day, and you're speaking this language, and those situations are always negative, such as you have customers yelling at you all the time, and those are the memories that are shaping your language learning journey, you're going to tie your language studies to those experiences, and you might not want to speak that language. You might come home and find yourself not wanting to practice anymore, or not wanting to watch TV in that language. And because of that, I just kind of wanted to do this video so that we can all be self-aware when we make decisions. And ultimately, I think the best way to avoid or try to avoid these situations, because it is trial and error, sometimes you don't know what you want and you do give it a fair shot, as I said before, but one of the ways that you can help avoid this situation potentially is by knowing your ultimate goal. Is language learning just a hobby for you, or is it something that you do hope to have a career in? Do you know what career specifically? Do you know what you're working towards? If you know that, if you know what you want to do with these languages in the end, it could help you shape your decisions for the future. Maybe you realize that you don't want it to be part of your career, or you just want to do this for fun, but then you decide to major in the language, and then you're realizing, wow, I really don't like this. I actually like studying on my own more. Well, if your ultimate goal was for this to be a hobby, and you're not interested in literature or whatever you may be studying in your program specifically, then maybe it's okay to not major in it. Maybe a minor is good enough to combine with your major in whatever other field that is. Or maybe just not studying it at all. Maybe taking one class, or maybe just doing outside studies on your own time through an online tutor or self-study. Same thing with work. Maybe you know that you don't want to use it in your career and you want it to remain as a hobby. That's okay. Don't pressure yourself to use it all the time, because I think us language learners have this tendency to pressure ourselves to always be using the language in every aspect of our lives, and that could lead to burnout, it could lead to stress, it could lead to a language rut at worst, and if you don't get out of it, then you'll never pick up that language again, unless you do get out of it one day, but it can take a very long time. If you have negative experiences, especially the longer you're having those negative experiences and they're building up, the longer you're going to want to stay away from languages. At least that's what I've found in my own life, and I'm sure there are other people who could agree with that. Now I want to open up the conversation to you. Have you ever applied for a job just because it said bilingual, or just because you knew you could practice your languages and you realized that it wasn't for you? Or if you've had positive experiences, I welcome this kind of conversation as well. I want to continue the conversation from Twitter. I love hearing people's experiences, their stories about the jobs that they've had, or their opinions as well. Is money more important to you, or is job satisfaction more important to you? Is using your languages in work more important to you, or just enjoying it as a hobby? Do you feel pressure to be using your languages all the time because you feel like you're too busy to study outside of work or school, so you embed it into your schedule by studying a language as a major or by having a job that requires you to speak that language? I think there are plenty of great language jobs out there. I know I would love to have some of them. I've seen wonderful combinations where people will do exercise in a language, or they'll be in the medical field using a language, because really you could combine it with just about anything. But then also there are some jobs out there that I wouldn't want to do whether I'm speaking the language or not. So it is up to the individual in the end, and what you want, what your ultimate goal is in life, whether it is to make money using your languages or to be doing something completely different, but then using your languages at home or by doing language exchanges outside of work/school. Alright, that's it for this week. I know it was a longer video, but I did have a lot to say. I thank you for sticking around, and please share this with people because I think that we do feel this pressure to be using languages 24/7, and while I like to use languages as much as possible, it really is important to know what kinds of memories you're tying to your languages. Rather than in the beginning when I was saying that maybe you're not going to enjoy every part of your language journey, but if you are in a situation where you hate it and you're starting to hate the language that you're studying, hate is a strong word. If you are starting to really dislike that language and every time someone tries to speak it to you, you kind of roll your eyes, then maybe it's time to change something, whatever that something may be. Don't forget to subscribe for generally positivity and language encouragement, sometimes more of a real talk like this, language tips and advice, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!